Latest with Kyle Kuzma. We're going to dive into all of that right now with our guest, our guy, Howard Beck, GQ Sports. You can follow him on Twitter at Howard Beck. Howard, thanks for jumping on with Kyle and Chris Watkins. What's going on, man?
Gentlemen, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, good after morning, depending on where you are. Howard, let's dive into free agency and just this NBA offseason right quick. I feel like maybe unlike in recent years, we've already had a flurry of moves. How much do you think this free agency period, how wild do you predict it to be? How much movement are you expecting?
It's a great question, and per usual, it's kind of a difficult one to answer or forecast. A lot of times, even as we're gauging this kind of thing across the league, talking to GMs and others about what they expect, it often doesn't even go the way the people who are actually signing these deals and making these offers even expect. It's its own organic thing. And we have some strange circumstances this offseason that are unique. One is a new CBA coming in effective Saturday, though they're still trying to finish it to the extent that they can send it out to the GMs who don't even have it to look at yet. But the new CBA is going to be highly restrictive, as I'm sure your listeners have heard. It's going to have a lot tougher penalties for high-spending teams, and it means not just luxury tax type penalties, but losing the ability to add to your roster via cap exceptions or via sign-in trades and all kinds of other tools. And because of that, I think that's part of what we've seen in the last couple of weeks. Now, the Wizards were going to tear down anyway. So the Wizards send out Beal. It was a terrible contract. They needed to unload it. They've got a new front office. But deals like that, or the Warriors trading Jordan Poole, are being influenced at least in part by teams trying to get their books in order. And because of that, it might mean a little bit different kind of offseason. We also don't have a great free agent class. The biggest names are probably staying put. James Harden, Kyrie Irving. I don't think Draymond Green is leaving. So I think you're down to second-tier type players. So two things are going to fuel, I think, a really active trade market. And again, this is speculative, and this is what some people around the league expect, but who knows? There could be a lot more trades than usual because, one, there just aren't top free agents available. If you really need a talent infusion, the trade route is the way to go. Two, there are a lot of teams that are going to be just looking to offload contracts. Again, John Collins was on the market as a trade chip for like 732 consecutive days or something. And the Hawks never got an offer that they liked, and then they gave him away for the remains of Rudy Gay and a second-round pick. It was a straight-up salary dump because the Hawks are feeling financial pressure, and it was an absolute squandering of a resource because they should have gotten more back from him for him. And I don't know if they could have done that now, but obviously they could have for the last couple of years. But deals like that, if you're shocked that John Collins was basically just given away, that's the environment teams are now operating in, where they're just trying to get their books in order, trying to offload mistakes. And then, of course, on top of everything else, we have the Damian Lillard saga.
Right, Howard, and that's exactly what I want to ask you about, talking about trades. I mean, this Dame situation is just it's changing every day, it seems like. To me, it feels like the best possible route for both is that it just ends and both teams go their separate ways. It feels like Portland is more than capable right now with the players they have of leaning into a rebuild, and Dame could be moved to a winning organization. How do you see that situation playing out?
So the sense around the league is that this is this kind of standoff, staring contest where both sides probably recognize that there's a lot to be gained for each of them by parting ways, but nobody wants to be the one to do it. And so the Blazers don't want to trade Damian Lillard unless he wants to be traded, and Damian Lillard doesn't want to say he wants to be traded because, you know, he's always talked about being a Blazer for life and loyal to Portland and everything else. And I think that's sincere. I think from a practical standpoint, it's hard to argue the point that they'd both be better off with a parting of ways. So he's about to turn 33 in a couple of weeks, and he's coming off a great season, but a guard at his size in his mid-30s, like, you don't know how much longer you've got at an elite level. And so, you know, trading him somewhere where he can actually be in contention with, if not for titles, then at least deep playoff runs makes sense. And they could get back a boatload of stuff and add that stuff to Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe and be on their way. But it, you know, easy for us to say, right? We don't have the emotional investment or the long-standing ties that you're dealing with, or how fans will respond and how season ticket holders will respond. There's always more to it. So it's easy for us to be glib about it and say, trade him, get a haul back and start over. It's not that easy. And he is arguably the greatest Blazer in franchise history. And that's not an easy thing to do. But I do think people around the league expect that if it doesn't happen this summer, that it's inevitable that it will happen. And, again, that's speculative by other teams. No one knows for sure. I think we're going to know more in a couple of days here, because if the first thing that happens in free agency is the Blazers going all out to bring back Jeremy Grant and or other moves that look like, these are win now veterans that could be persuasive and assure Damian Lillard that they're actually going to be able to compete in the present, then okay. But as it stands right now, they didn't trade the pick that became Scoot Henderson. They didn't trade the pick that became Shaedon Sharpe a year ago. They have been trying to straddle the line between the present and the future. And as we saw with the Warriors to some extent, trying to straddle the line or pursue two timelines is really hard.
Yeah. I agree with you, Howard. But I will say Portland is in a position of strength, and I'm talking about from a basketball standpoint. They have two paths that they can go down, and both paths, to me, are good ones, are good problems to have. All right, let's say you do trade Dame, you get a haul back, and now you have your rebuilding and you got some young talent. Or let's say you get rid of some of that young talent, you bring in some veterans, and now you're competitive again. I think that the biggest problem is the inaction. Where they can mess this up is inaction. I don't care which path you take. Either path is going to be a positive one. I think if you're Portland, it's like we talked about yesterday. It's being stuck in a marriage and nobody wants to be the bad guy or anything like that. But once you make a decision, there's a path forward for Portland, whatever decision you make.
Yeah, you got to pick one. That's the thing. And that's, I've covered the league for 26 years. And I think the thing, I don't care about wins, losses, anything else, nothing. It doesn't matter to me, right? I have no emotional investment, but I can sometimes get frustrated as an observer who analyzes the league, looking at teams that clearly have just backed themselves into a corner or don't have a clear direction, don't have a clear agenda, don't have any real convictions about what they're trying to do. Some teams, you can see it, they'll spend years just kind of meandering, just reach it. The Wizards were like this for a long time. The Magic were like this for a long time. And it's guys, try something different. Pick a direction and stick to it. Have some, whatever it may be. And I think the thing with the Blazers in recent years, they this was the old administration when Neil O'Shea was running it, but they didn't want to break up the CJ McCollum, Damian Lillard backcourt, even though the entire world could see that thing had reached a ceiling. And then they finally did unload CJ McCollum, but they didn't get back a ton for him. And then they replicated the same problem of having a small backcourt with two offensive-minded guys by having Anthony Simons plugged in. And again, there's not been a bold agenda to just say, we are all in on the present. We are all in on trying to make sure that Damian Lillard has a surrounding cast that enables him to make deep playoff runs and maybe have a chance at a title. And the last couple of years in particular, they're absolutely straddling the fence. You cannot argue that. You can say, if people want to argue, and plenty of people have been arguing with me about this on Twitter, if you want to argue that you should not trade Damian Lillard because he's too important and you should keep him and try to do everything to win now, that's fine. If you want to make the argument that you shouldn't trade away the youth because you don't want to mortgage your future, fine. But if you're going to be all about the future, then it's hurting the present and it's hurting Damian Lillard's ability to make the playoff runs now, in which case you might as well trade Damian Lillard. I do think it kind of has to be one or the other. And this idea of straddling the two things, it doesn't work because 19 and 20-year-olds don't win in this league. We know this. It's very, very rare for rookies and second-year guys to be key players on deep playoff teams. And so you do have to kind of choose. And the Blazers have been kind of deciding not to choose. And that's the problem.
The great Yogi Berra once said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. And I think that's what the Blazers need to do. Just whatever route you go, just do it already. Howard, we got to get you out of here on a Kings question at least. The rumors seem to be now circulating that the Kings are re-engaged in talks with Harrison Barnes. I'm just curious what you think about the Kings if they were to quote unquote run it back and not make a massive splash in free agency going after guys like Kyle Kuzma or Jeremy Grant or Chris Middleton, some of the bigger names out there. What are your thoughts on if the Kings were to run it back, and do you think that that's the best route for the Kings to take this offseason with all the cap space they have?
I think like everybody else, when they made the trade last week to unload Rashawn Holmes' contract, the first thing you think is they've got a plan in mind to use that cap room in free agency, or maybe to absorb a contract in a trade, in an uneven trade. That could happen too. And I have to believe, I do believe that there's more to what's going on there than just bring back Harrison Barnes. And that's not a bad thing to bring back Harrison Barnes. It's not a knock on him, but like, you're not moving the ball forward if it's just the same group. And my fear for the Kings would be you have this breakthrough, and if you just say let's just stay the course and continue with this group, okay, fine, but I don't know how much more you can get. Like, obviously, look, Fox can take more steps forward. Murray's going to develop as a young player, but the rest of the league isn't standing still. The rest of the West isn't standing still, and a lot of the teams below them, had records that were not reflective of who they were by the end of this past season, right? Like the Lakers didn't have a great record, but they made the conference finals. And the Clippers, if they get healthy, the Suns made a big trade and hurt all their depth. All these teams that are below them could leapfrog them if they just stand still. And they know that. I don't think they're going to stand still. I think that whether they bring Barnes back and find a way to keep enough cap room to add another player, whether it's letting Barnes walk and using, I think up to $36 million in room to go out and get a couple of guys, I think we're going to see at least some substantial addition.
Howard Beck, GQ Sports, Aggie's finest, right? UC Davis. Are you in the Ring of Honor out there in Davis or anything like that? You got a plaque anywhere on campus?
No plaques, no rings, no anything. That's okay. I don't need it. If UC Davis wants to send me anything, I would take it. But no. But yes, a proud Aggie, and appreciate the UC Davis shout out always.
Absolutely.
Howard Beck, appreciate you, man. GQ Sports. Follow him on Twitter, Howard Beck at Howard Beck. Howard, thanks for jumping on with Drapes and Chris Watkins.
Thanks, fellas. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Beck.
Good stuff right there from Howard Beck. We'll react to what he had to say. Plus, we'll take your calls, 916-339-1140. You're listening to Sactown Sports, 1140.
Need your Niners fix?